I'm gonna share it on my main page too, just in case anybody does want to check it out.
You want to check this out? That's right. And our matching outfits, so we didn't plan.
I see that. Let's see.
All right. And our matching outfits.
All right. Let's go ahead and get it.
A psychological podcast with a cultural twist. Subscribe now and join me, your host, Malvin 9000, every Monday as we dive deep into the nature of power itself. The power of love, friendships, sex, money, anxiety, the truth, the lies, and everything in between. Let me, along with special guests, help you tap into the power of your mind.
Thank you, everybody, for joining the Power Level Podcast. Make sure that you subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. I have an awesome guest today. She is in Tennessee, and she has came to bless us with some of her knowledge. She's came to talk about her book, her upbringing, her life, and most importantly, how to be toxic person proof. Yes, you heard it right. Toxic person proof. We all have at least ran into a toxic person or know a toxic person. So she's going to give us some great insights. She has her own podcast, a globally renowned podcast. Awesome guest has been on this podcast talking about all the different facets of course, staying away from people that's toxic. So y'all, thank you. Give it warm welcome to my special guest, Sarah K Ramsey. How are you doing today?
I am great. Excited to dig into this.
Yes. I'm so excited to dig into this. I mean, when I heard that there's someone out there with a book to keep to keep toxic people away, I was like, yo, I have to have her on my show to talk. Yeah. I mean, we love talking about inspirational stories, but also we do love to help. That's the main thing why we do podcasts, right? To help people get through difficult times in their life. And sometimes when we're dealing with a toxic situation, sometimes we feel obviously stuck and we don't feel like there's any answers. So before we get into that, before you give us all your bright and brilliant answers, I just want to kind of give a little background to the guest as far as how you got started. And yeah.
I was the ultimate good girl, like whatever like people's definition is of like a good girl and trying to do the right thing and trying to be helpful. And I joke and say that instead of like going on a spring break trip to go drinking with my friends, I went to work in an orphanage. And it's actually a true story. I was like disgustingly good, which toxic people love, right? Because I didn't think anyone would ever hurt me. I thought God or the universe or whoever, I was just going to be nice and be forgiving and be pleasant. And then people would just be nice back. And now it's a very naive way of thinking. But as I've gone through this journey, there are people in their 50s who've thought that way, people in their 60s who've thought that way, people, in their 40s that thought that way. And it's a really dangerous way of thinking because if you are a good, kind, loving, giving person, you expect the people you run into to be good, kind, loving, giving, and forgiving back. And if they're not, and they're manipulative, and they're playing you, and they're taking advantage of you, you're just like, we kind of have rose-colored glasses, right? And it's like, well, they didn't mean it. Well, hurt people hurt people. Well, they'll do better next time. And you can just really dig some real holes in your life with that way of thinking.
Yeah, it's very true. It's definitely what they say, logical thinking too. Like you said, we want to think that everybody is going to follow the golden rule, but it doesn't work like that. And kind of touched on a little bit too, as far as it sounds like you might have been. Would you call yourself an empath or no?
Oh gosh, yes, very very much an empath. And Sandra L. Brown of the Institute for Relational Harm. She did a study with Cornell University, and she talked about the Big Five personality test. Okay. And so that is openness, agreeableness, conscientiousness, extroversion, and neuroticism. That's like, it spells ocean, but it's like 5. Okay.
Wow.
So when she started studying people who'd been in toxic relationships, they were very open, which meant they were trusting, more trusting. They were agreeable, which meant, the relationship's more important to me than, getting my way. So then they didn't realize, whoa, I'm never getting my way. Whoa. Yeah. It's never my turn, right? And then conscientious, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to be a good person, wanting to make the relationship work, wanting to follow the golden rule or follow their faith background to a T, which is a very different impression when people think about someone who's been in a toxic relationship. You usually think about words like codependency or daddy issues or broken home or whatever. And the studies and the surveys were actually showing it's openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness, which is like what I was saying, that version of me that was just like, oh, I'm sure it'll all work out. And it does not always work out that way, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, just it's describing all those different things too. And it's tough because, again, you're going like that without those blinders on, and you're thinking that people are going to open and accept you, and they do, but they do also to the toxic person. You are looked at as a target, unfortunately. Really? So, even before we kind of even get into, your background too, but do you have any tips? Because it's tough as an empath to control that, to control that. How do you be able to control that side of you and, in a sense, maybe guard that side of you, and also be able to recognize that, hey, this person is a target, or they're not targeting you.
Yeah. And I'm happy to talk strategies. One of the biggest things that has been really helpful is thinking about who I want to be in the world. Okay. So if you're a good, kind, loving, empathetic person, you think about like who you want to show up as in the world, right? You want to be like a good person. And if I'm a good person, I don't want to help spread darkness. So if someone's selfish or blaming others for their behavior or not solving an addiction issue they may have, or hurting others, or always having anger issues, or whatever else it is, if I am saying, that's okay, I'll be your emotional punching bag, that's okay, I'll lie for you, that's okay, I'll pretend that didn't happen, then I'm actually spreading darkness into the world. And usually people who are empaths, that like, oh, wait, I don't want to do that, right? That's not what I meant to do. But just like, it's not nice or kind to take someone who's struggling with a cocaine addiction. You don't take them cocaine and say you're being nice, right? That's terrible. That's not kind to them. If someone has a food addiction, right, and they're, immobilized in a bed and they're about to have a heart attack and you're feeding them fast food, like that's not nice to take, and it's going to hurt them. And if someone has a past behavior of a pattern of anger, that they're always flipping on other people, always blaming, trying to be Jekyll and Hyde, so always trying to manage their image, but then acting like, they're really good, but in secret they have all this darkness. There's nothing nice about helping them become more of who they are. That's not nice.
Very true. Very true. So really, for you to know all these different things too, Queen Cole, she just joined us too. She said, that's a good point. Thank you. I appreciate you for tuning in. But knowing everything that you kind of went through as far as, all right, you skipped out on the drinks, right? You skipped out on drinks. You went to volunteer. Yeah. What was the turning point for you then? Because this
I almost killed my friends. I was driving a car. I also wasn't drinking, but I do tell that story because it sounds like somebody who was like drunk and then, had a thing. And it was like, no, I was like, my body was shutting down from stress, shutting down from people pleasing, shutting down from trying to take care of everyone but myself, trying to manage everyone else's darkness. Not everyone, but, several people in my life who I was just like, who do you think I should be? Who do you need to be today? Oh, hurt people. Sure. I'm strong enough to take that. You can give me your bad days because I can handle it. These are all things that I believed at that time. And my body shut down in the middle of Charlotte, North Carolina. I was driving a car with 3 of my friends, and all of a sudden just stopped driving the car, like blacked out. Like they said, you just almost fainted, but it was like stress. And I think there were 2 or 3 mothers in the car. I was a mother at that time, and then a couple others. And I just went, oh my gosh. Obviously I'm trying to ignore what my body and brain is screaming at me. And I'm just, no, I can handle it. It's no big deal. No, that didn't hurt that much. And that was a huge turning point. And that was kind of the start of it. And then the start of my journey into this career is there was a local cheerleader who was shot in the head by her boyfriend. She was asleep and killed her. So it was on Dateline and all this stuff. And I started a mental health campaign for teens at the time, and then really realized I wanted to help these teens' mothers. So I went into who I am now and helping people become toxic person proof.
Wow, that is an amazing journey too. I mean, especially you being a mom too at the time too. So you people pleasing, but not only that, you had to deal with your children, deal with your child, take care of your child. And you were trying to, I'm sure you was pulled in all different directions. And it's amazing too. Your body will really tell you when to stop. Like, it doesn't matter how much you want to keep going. Your body will literally stress will eat at you. I always tell people it's so scary how stress, it looks the same under MRI. It's like physical pain, so, and literally right there, you had to stop. I mean, that is a huge journey. And then the fact that, you advocating for teens, a lot of people don't understand that teens are going through that tough period where they're trying to get to that adult stage. And there's teenagers too that are toxic. There's
Oh yeah. I had so many teens talking and asking about that. And what's really difficult in a school setting is if there's a teen bullying another teen, really, it's really tough to separate the teens if they're in a class together and then that kid's bullying them outside of the, in the hall outside of that class. It's a really tough environment. And I heard a really great yet terrible fact. And it was that they had cell phones when I was in high school, but it wasn't like now where you have everything, but my parents, if they got bullied at school, they went home and they could shut their bedroom door. But now teens take the bullying with them on their phone into their room. So there's no escape from it. And I think that's a really important thing for parents and society to understand, that these teens, it's even worse because it never goes away and stays online forever compared to my bad haircut when I was in middle school, right? It's gone forever. No one's talking about it anymore.
Yes. That's exactly true. I mean, and we had this story out here it was in Plano, Texas. I'm not sure if you heard about that. The child was bullied. He was bullied already. He was already getting bullied at school. He was bullied enough that he quit the football team, but these bullies invited him to a party at their home, and they made him drink urine, and they bullied him. Anyways, it went on social media. It was a really big thing that happened earlier this year. This was national news. So I was thinking about that too when I was thinking about your book. Like, I wonder if you had to also think about how much social media does play a role now in people that are toxic and also harassment. So that goes for me to ask, literally, how long did it take you to write this book, and what made you again start the journey on writing this book?
So I have been life coaching people in how to build an amazing life after a toxic relationship for 3-4 years now. And so that was like the things I had learned in my own life and research and just endless research. And then I had all these conversations with person after person after person after person, and seeing all these patterns and seeing these beliefs like hurt people. Well, sometimes hurt people, and sometimes hurt people help people. right? They become doctors, they become nurses, they become podcast hosts, they become professional speakers. They try to take their pain and use it to help others. Sometimes people do that.
True.
Right? And then sometimes people use it as an excuse to be mean to other people. Like, but there's like to have a blanket statement, like it's okay for you, it's okay for you to be mean to me because bad things have happened to you. We're really creating some really dangerous dynamics. I'll give you an example. So we were riding in the car and my grandmother said, my son was saying that somebody was bullying him at school.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother said, gosh, if he's bullying you, he's probably lonely. Maybe you should be friends with him and then he won't bully you anymore. And I was like, what? That explains all the problems in my life. Like literally, that explains everything that's wrong in my life. Like that statement. And she was trying to do the right thing. She's it's fine, whatever. But it explains a lot about my framework of thinking, and I take my son and say, if someone's mean to you, it's okay to stay away from them. Exactly. You don't have to be extra nice to them because they're being mean to you. If you can, stay away from them. And it's that simple. But
exactly.
Super complicated. Like, well, they probably didn't mean it, or well, maybe this, or and we start to make these excuses because we all see from our own perspective. Like we all see from our own perspective. It's one of the worst things about being a human, right? You grew up in Texas, I grew up in Tennessee. We had different experiences from that, right? You're a man, I'm a woman. We had different experiences, right? And lots of different experiences. And we can only see from our own perspective. And what makes rich humanity is if we start to see out of the eyes of another, if we start to see their journey. And we, I think, are doing so much better in that in 1,000 different ways, like as the world is changing.
Very true.
But we also have this kind of like, well, I want to be kind, I want to be loving, I want to be forgiving, which can still really leave us vulnerable to toxic situations.
And in other words, too, you're pretty much saying, too, it is okay to set boundaries.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. If someone is nice to you, move toward them. If they are mean to you, move away from them. It is very simple. And we just make it incredibly complicated. I mean, we talked a little bit about, religious communities and faith backgrounds that really, just turn the other cheek. I mean, I let people abuse me. This forgiving someone 70 times 7, if you're talking about a biblical background, means that you have endless access to hurt me. Is that really what it means? I don't think so.
Yeah, definitely not. But
at times
right,
in my life, I would have. Yeah, absolutely. At times in my life, I would have thought, well, it's my job to suffer for Christ. I would have said that in that stage of my life. It's my job to suffer for Christ. And it's like, what good is that doing anyone? Like putting up with bad behavior is not making the world a better place. It's not.
Well, one of the things is too, you kind of talked about, your son talking about the bully. You also have relationships, but one of the things that might be not as simple to get away from is a toxic family member. Yeah. Do you have any strategies as far as dealing with a toxic, and not even, let's take it even closer, a parent. Because, of course, sometimes it just kind of trickles down too, and you have a toxic parent that you just cannot get away from, or maybe you can. What advice would you give someone that's dealing with a toxic parent?
So toxic behavior is absolutely on a spectrum. I mean, there's some toxic parents who are a little selfish and some toxic parents who are draining your life and draining your bank account and draining your every energy, right? So I do want to address that it's on a spectrum. And if you have a parent that it's kind of hard to get along with versus a parent who is, I've had stories about like identity theft and parents like stealing their children's identity, that's obviously two different conversations within that spectrum. But it can be really helpful to think what role they play in my life. Like, maybe they cannot be your emotional sounding board. You really want them to be, when I said I was going to be a full-time life coach, I assure you no one in my life thought, well, that's going to work, right? Like they did not think that. That's going to be a professional athlete or something. It's like, there's not that many people doing that full-time success, And so, when I'm talking about my dreams and talking about, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to do this, they're kind of like, okay, Sarah, kind of patting my head like, okay, well, that's a nice idea. And it's like, I'll show you, here we are now.
Yep.
At the time it was hurtful. And, when I put up with bad behavior in the past and people would say things like, well, you of all people, I never thought you would have put up with that. That's really hurtful. It's really degrading. And it's like, but I am strong. I am confident. I just was too nice. I was too nice. But maybe that person is good at helping with your children. Maybe they're great. They could be a great tennis partner where you're on two different sides of the court playing tennis and you can't really have a conversation with them about your hopes and dreams, but you can do something that still allows them to be in your life without giving them unlimited emotional access.
That's good. Not giving them full access. That's a great point.
Yes.
That is a really great point. I definitely like that. It does take so much time. I know that's one of the things is too, of course, it's not like you said, the spectrum is totally different. So it's not, everything doesn't work for everybody, but something is going to work. And it seems like that is one of the main things too, setting those boundaries, even with your parents. Hey, you can do this, we can do this, and it's okay. But using that assertiveness and letting them know. That is awesome. I mean, it seems like you kind of covered so many different things. But also too, I do want to talk about it because you kind of mentioned a little bit as far as when you brought up the Bible verses, but church has been kind of brought up too, as far as people using their faith, also using the Bible, using scriptures as a means of manipulation. And sometimes it's kind of skewed. What advice would you give someone who's dealing with that? Because I think a lot of people sometimes can use God and say, okay, this person is from God. So how can they hurt me if this person is from God?
So one of the most dangerous beliefs of my own life and others' life that I've seen is everyone within my church body is safe, and everyone outside of my church body is dangerous. Right. And it's almost like back our ancestors, like tribal, right? It's like my tribe. It's us versus them. Right. So, and we don't think about that in a church setting, us versus them, but that's really like our brain as it's changed, that's really what's happening. And so when you think about, okay, everybody that I know is safe and everyone I don't know is dangerous, right? We learn to watch out for strangers, not to watch out for sociopaths. We just do. So we assume everybody we know is safe for us, and it's just not true. So within the Bible culture, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are the fruits of the Spirit. If someone is a good person, you should be able to say, Malvin is love, Malvin is joy, Malvin is peace, Malvin is goodness, Malvin is gentleness, Malvin is self-control. And that should line up with who you are. Not, you go to church a lot, you can quote Bible verses. Now you use Bible verses to get your way. It's really hard to fake true, genuine humility and kindness and care and gentleness and self-control and love and joy. It's hard to fake those things. It's easy to show up to church. It's easy to carry a big Bible.
And it's definitely hard to fake those things. You can do it for a little while, but once something comes up and hits the fan, it's going to definitely always show. I'm going to read this comment to Raphael David Beeson on Facebook. He said, it took me a long time to put up strong boundaries with members of my family who were incredibly toxic. Being a man from the South, you feel like family is everything, no matter what they do. That is very true. That is very true. Definitely appreciate you for tuning in, David, too. He actually was one of my guests, too, on a while in the past too. An awesome guest too, if you ever need him to, Sarah.
Oh,
But
okay.
but yeah, he has an amazing testimony, amazing story. But yeah, everything that you said was really the nail on the head too. You know, really judging it all from you can use the fruits of the spirit. Say, hey, this person really, how am I even feeling when I'm even around this person too? Do you really speak on as far as like on energy, and how do you?
Oh, so much. So much. And that is in the subtitle of my book is Clear the Confusion and Learn to Trust Yourself. People always want to say, what's a list of red flags I can look out for? And I'm like, okay, let's say we're talking to Jenny. Okay, Jenny, if I got a group of 13-year-old girls together and said, I'll buy a pizza, whoever can recognize the red flags. What if someone is hiding their phone all the time from you? What if they are cutting you down and saying you need to work on yourself all the time? What if you catch them in lies? What if you find them cheating on you? What if they use phrases that make you feel bad about yourself or make you feel less than or make you feel smaller? Do you think those are red flags? All these 13-year-old girls would say, yeah, those are red flags.
Exactly.
But then 33-year-old girls and boys are ignoring them. So it's not just knowing what the red flags are. It's having the integrity and trust in yourself not to ignore them.
That's powerful. That is definitely very powerful. I can't wait to take that clip to post. That's going to be awesome. That is definitely powerful. So even with all that being said, you know, you're writing the book, you're going through the whole process. Do you feel like a toxic person can eventually change?
There's obviously a spectrum, but I think I want to go back to the concept of taking turns. Okay. So when we were 3 years old and 4 years old and 5 years old, people were telling us to take turns. We've heard that our whole lives. If you're 33 or 44 or 55 and you haven't figured out that you're supposed to take turns, if you think it's always your turn, you're always the most important person in the room, if you think your feelings, your hobbies, your interests, your mood is always more important than everyone else's, usually they don't want to change. They just don't want to. They feel like they're always getting their way. And so someone says, hey, you should be a good person and not always get your way. They're like, why would I do that? This is going really well for me. So, but it is a spectrum. I don't want people to say, oh, people can never change, because that's obviously not.
And I'm glad you did mention that, because, we have been using the word toxic, but of course, one of the main roots of that word is to narcissistic, a narcissist. That's what they do teach. They say, the malignant narcissist people, studies say they do not change. They might get a little better, but they say they do not change at all. But again, that is, of course, one of the highest spectrums that you can go to. So it is essential to know, okay, what am I looking for? Do these person have these signs too? So what do you give signs of what to look for in a toxic person as an empath? Do you tell people, hey, these 10 things are toxic? Could you share some of those maybe signs?
Yeah, absolutely. So they don't play by the same set of rules. They set up the game where they always win. Okay. So, and the finish line is always moving. If you and I are in a relationship, I'm like, well, if you would just do this, we'd be happy. And then as soon as you do that, I'm going to say, but now I need you to do this to be happy. Now I need you to do this to be happy. Right. So you keep working, thinking it will eventually work. And you're just like paddling water. And always feeling like you're drowning. And they're like, paddle harder. If you love me, you'd paddle harder. If you love me, you'd get it right. Okay. So it's exhausting. If you're in a relationship that feels completely exhausting and has for a long pattern of time, it's highly likely that's toxic.
Very true. Very true. That's definitely great tips to take in, tips for myself to even take in. With you doing all this life coaching, with you helping all these people, you even said it before too, in the past, when you were saying that you had that time where you kind of shut down, you were, trying to please people, but this is a different situation. You're trying to help people, but you are still an empath, still taking a lot in. How do you digress from the day of taking all this stuff in? Oh
my gosh, what a great question. Okay, so I what is that? To know thyself is true. I don't know. There's some quote like Shakespeare or something like to know thyself is true. And you can probably tell I'm very extroverted, right? Mm-hmm. So this is actually my third podcast interview today. It was supposed to be my fourth, but I was in for a summit. Then I had someone on my podcast and then here. And I'm as fresh and as happy and as joyful as I was on the first one. I love doing this. I've been on coaching calls all day. I love it, but I outsource. I'm not a numbers girl. Mm-hmm. Right? My admin work, I outsource. I know exactly I am the only person that can do this, and I am the best person in the world to do this. And everything else, I don't do. So I feel like I get to work at my strengths all the time.
Okay.
Which is very empowering. I'm always like, oh, I've got a call. Oh, yeah, this is great, because I feel like I'm always doing what I'm good at. And it's very energizing to feel like you're doing what you're good at. So, I'm really, my biggest pet peeve in the world is people who say I'm great at giving advice, but I don't take my own advice. Biggest pet peeve in the world. And people say that all the time. And it's like, oh, so you're a liar. You're telling people to do things that you're not willing to do yourself. That, to me, that's not living in integrity, right? It's not.
Very true. Very true.
So there are definitely times that I'll talk to people and I'll say, look, something may have happened. Oh, gosh, there was, a kid gets sick or something like that. And it's like, I can do your call with you right now, but I'm going to be really distracted and only half paying attention to you. Do you want to reschedule? And something like that. And there's just such an integrity and grace. It's obviously not often. You can't do that, every week and then people take you seriously. But leading that by example and saying I am not here. I cannot show up as my best self for you today. Can we reschedule to a time that I can give you my full heart and attention? Mm-hmm. Is very powerful. And people are all like, thank you so much. Right? Thank you so much for giving me that permission to do that in my own life. And for me to know that you cared enough about me to not just dial it in. Right? Nobody wants somebody to dial it in for them. You don't want to be the person that I I've got this podcast. I guess I'll get through it. I don't know what I'm going to say. That's not fair. And I also take naps.
Good.
But I love naps.
I'm team nap.
Especially like you and I, when we're doing stuff, later in the evening, and we want to be fresh, just as fresh for the late shift as the. So if I can, that 2:00, chill time, I'll either meditate or just kind of chill. And I've given myself a lot of grace to. I can't believe I'm even saying this right now. All my past coaches would be so thrilled. I've been staying in bed in the mornings until 7:30, which is really late for me because
that's a good late time. Usually that's still early. That's still early for a lot of people. That's a good late time. If that means you're going to sleep at a great time then.
I'm pretty serious about sleep because I love firing at all cylinders. So much of my work is very creative, and it's my little brain. I'm pulling things off the shelf. You're asking questions. I'm tick, 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 like a little berry. I'm pulling it out. And people ask me coaching questions about their lives, and they say, what can I do about this? And I tick, 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 tick with all the research I've done. If I'm not firing at all cylinders, they're going to ask me a question, and I'm going to halfway be able to answer them. And then they're going to make a decision based off of that. And based off their life, I didn't show up well for them. And not that I can solve all their problems, because I obviously cannot. And that would be, I'm not, God, Jesus, Buddha, whoever, wrapped up in one. I'm only human. But I'm a human who can live in integrity and try to show up as my best self for my husband, for my children, for my podcast, for my podcast interviews, for my enrollment calls, for my coaching clients. And then just really try to decompress when I'm not.
That's awesome. And I love, one of the main things too out of this, everything out of this interview, you're operating in integrity in everything that you do. Integrity.
I'm not perfect, but I am trying.
So with that all being said too, also, is there a motto or a quote that you live by?
Yes, spread happiness wherever you go. And that is a Mother Teresa quote. It used to be on my Facebook, and I think I have it downstairs in my kid's bathroom, actually. But I talk about very heavy topics, right? And my book is funny. It's like, it's like if Tina Fey's Bossy Pants and the sociopath next door had a baby, it would be my
wow.
And so it's funny and it's light. And I'm not, I don't know if I'm funny, but I'm light and I'm energetic. And, it's bringing that energy into a really tough conversation. It's kind of like Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So if I can spread that joy and spread happiness and talk about really, really tough truths, but leave you feeling empowered and hopeful rather than in despair, then something's going right.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate it. I want you to make sure to let everybody know, where can they purchase your book at?
Here it is, Becoming Toxic Person Proof. Oh, a little bit of glare from my...
That is awesome.
Yeah. The red flag is poking out of a hole because we tend to ignore them sometimes. And it really is about clearing the confusion and learning to trust yourself. And within the book, I call it, instead of a toxic relationship, because people think, oh, that's like a boyfriend, girlfriend, I call it a toxic person encounter. Because look at Epstein recently, look at, all these people, Bill Cosby, like, oh, we love him. Then it's like, oh, he's raping women. This is terrible. I remember hearing that story and I was just like, no, I know Bill Cosby. Like, right? And there's a lot of grace when it's like, oh, toxic people are good at fooling people. Okay. There's grace in that rather than, well, you had a toxic girlfriend, so you're stupid, but I had a toxic boss, so that's fine. Right? It's not.
Yeah.
We tend to point our finger at other people's toxic situations and miss them in our own lives. So I call it a toxic person encounter.
I like that.
To be a little more holistic.
I like that because you're exactly right. Of course, easy with your boss. They're like, oh yeah, you can see that coming from a mile a day. But someone who's being charming or being not nice as they appear to be, and really they have other different things beneath them. So yeah, that is great. But yeah, make sure definitely let everybody know where they can purchase it.
Yeah. So Google Toxic Person Proof. You're definitely going to see me, see my book. You can get it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And now people are like reselling it and all that kind of stuff. So if you Google Toxic Person Proof, you're going to see my book and you're going to see my podcast, the Toxic Person Proof podcast. And I have tons of authors and expert interviews all the time on a variety of subjects. I know, Malvin, you were talking about that because I'm really obsessed with helping people build an amazing life after a toxic relationship. So I'll have sports high performers, confidence coaches, people who interview people in business, because we kind of get this idea in our head, like, okay, boundaries, get out of a toxic relationship. And it's like, yeah, but like, is that the end of our story? Like, my legacy is I had good boundaries? Like, no, I want my legacy to be that I was amazing, that I led by example, that I lived in integrity, that I helped others. I don't want it to be that I got out of a toxic situation. Like, that's like important. It's important. It's very important, but it's not the end. It's for a new beginning. And so I really help people on that new beginning.
That is awesome. So y'all make sure y'all get the book Toxic Person Proof by Sarah K. Ramsey. Also check out her podcast, Toxic Person Proof Podcast. Again, like she said, she covers so many different people. Like I said, she talks about religion. I believe I seen someone else on there too, even talking about sleep. I think it was Dr. Moby. So yeah, definitely check out her podcast. Awesome guest. I appreciate you so much for joining, and hopefully I'll be able to get you on again. The last thing I want to ask too, again, because I don't know if you had any other plans, but what are your plans for the future? Is there a TED Talk? Anything else coming up? What's going on?
Well, I've already written my TED Talk for forever, but I need to work on that. But my next book is going to be on problem solving and kind of what toxic people put you in situations where you're choosing between a rock and a hard place, right? Just like terrible decisions, and people get really stuck because they're like, well, what's the right decision, right? Like, which one am I not going to have any pain from or consequences from? And when you're choosing between a rock and a hard place, or two choices that it's really difficult to do. I personally think what I found in coaching is needing some really better problem solving strategies. I also see people on these like crazy healing journeys, and they're like doing this, they're doing this. And I kind of say, what problem are you trying to solve? And they're like, well, I don't know. And it's like, are you tired? And they're like, yeah. I said, well, that's because you're working, but you're not solving any problems, so you never get ahead. So that's going to be one of the big things that's coming up for me.
That's awesome. Y'all be on the lookout. I love that. Thank you again, Sarah, and I can't wait to see what you have in the future.
Thank you.
And again, and thank y'all for tuning in, to those watching with Sharon. Make sure that y'all follow the Power Level Podcast. You can follow it on Apple, Spotify. You can also go to my website, malvin9k.com. And again, make sure y'all take care of yourself and keep spreading love. Have a great one.